My name is Loretta, and I just turned 34 last month. You know that moment when you realize your family will never see you for who you really are? Mine came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was closing a property deal in my Manhattan office. My phone rang, and I saw my mother's name flash across the screen. I answered with a smile, expecting to catch up about my upcoming wedding. Instead, I heard the words that would change everything. Your sister's wedding is the family's priority. We can't come to yours. My heart sank, but my voice remained steady as I replied, "That's fine." They had no idea I owned a $6 million villa in Tuscany where Alessandro and I would be saying our vows. Their loss entirely. If you've ever been overlooked by your family, hit that like button and let me know where you're watching from. This story will show you how sometimes silence and success are the sweetest revenge. Growing up as the oldest daughter in a middle-class family in suburban Boston wasn't easy. From the moment my sister Jasmine was born when I was 3, the spotlight in our household shifted permanently. She was the golden child with her perfect curls and charming smile, while I was the responsible one expected to set an example but rarely praised for doing so. Our childhood home was filled with framed photos. Jasmine winning her first dance competition at age 5. Jasmine holding a trophy at the state science fair. Jasmine in her prom dress. The only photo of me was tucked in a corner, a simple school portrait that my grandmother had insisted on displaying. "Loretta is photogenic too," she'd argued with my mother, who had replied that I was just more serious by nature. The truth was, they rarely bothered to take pictures of my achievements. My 10th birthday party was canceled last minute because Jasmine had come down with a mild cold. "We'll celebrate next weekend," my father promised, but next weekend came and went without mention. When I reminded them, my mother seemed annoyed. "Don't be selfish, Loretta. Your sister was sick." The following month, when Jasmine turned 7, they rented out an entire indoor playground and invited 50 kids. I sat in the corner helping serve cake while my parents beamed at Jasmine blowing out her candles. School became my refuge. I threw myself into academics, bringing home straight A's and joining every club I could. Not for recognition, I'd learned not to expect that, but because school was the one place where merit actually mattered. My teachers saw potential in me, even when my parents didn't. Mrs. Donovan, my 11th grade English teacher, was the first adult who ever told me, "You're going to do extraordinary things, Loretta." I clung to those words like a lifeline. When college applications rolled around, I applied to 15 schools, writing my essays late at night after finishing my homework and my chores. My father looked surprised when I told him I'd been accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship. "That's nice," he said, before immediately turning the conversation to Jasmine's junior prom dress dilemma. The partial scholarship wasn't enough, and my parents made it clear that they couldn't contribute much. "We're saving for Jasmine's college fund," my mother explained. "You understand, right? She wants to go to medical school eventually." So I took out student loans and worked 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Meanwhile, 3 years later, my parents paid Jasmine's full tuition at NYU, where she changed her major 4 times before settling on communications. "Your sister is finding herself," my mother would say defensively whenever I called home. I never complained about my situation. What would be the point? The final blow came at my college graduation. I'd been named valedictorian, something I was genuinely proud of after years of hard work. "We'll definitely be there," my mother had promised when I told her about the ceremony date 6 months in advance. 2 weeks before graduation, she called to say they couldn't make it after all. Jasmine had made it to the finals of a regional singing competition that fell on the same day. "This is a huge opportunity for her, Loretta. I know you understand." I sat alone during the graduation dinner, surrounded by classmates and their beaming families. My roommate Lisa's parents insisted I join them, unable to comprehend that my family had simply chosen not to come. "They must be devastated to miss this," Lisa's mother said, squeezing my hand. I nodded and forced a smile, unwilling to admit the truth. That night, in our empty dorm room, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so extraordinary that their oversight would become their loss, not mine. I wouldn't seek validation or beg for attention. I would simply succeed, quietly and consistently, until the day they realized what they'd missed all along. My first job after college was at a boutique real estate firm in New York. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with 3 roommates, eating ramen noodles and saving every penny. While my peers splurged on brunches and designer clothes, I studied the market obsessively. Within 18 months, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small down apartment in an and coming neighborhood. I renovated it on weekends, learning plumbing and basic electrical work from YouTube videos to save money. 6 months later, I sold that apartment for a 40% profit and bought 2 more. The pattern continued, and by 27, I had a portfolio of 15 properties. I never told my family about any of it. During our brief occasional calls, they never really asked about my life in detail. If they had, I might have shared my success, but the questions never came. When my mother would ask, "How's work?" I'd simply answer, "It's fine." She never pressed for more, quickly redirecting the conversation to Jasmine's latest achievement or drama. In a strange way, their indifference had become my greatest asset. Without the pressure to meet their expectations, I was free to build my life exactly as I wanted. The little girl, desperate for her parents' approval, had grown into a woman who no longer needed it. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I fell asleep alone in my increasingly luxurious apartments, trying to ignore the hollow feeling that success couldn't quite fill. The 10 years following college transformed my life in ways I could never have imagined. That first small apartment purchase snowballed into what financial magazines would later call one of New York's most impressive self-made real estate portfolios. By 30, I had expanded beyond residential properties into commercial real estate and hospitality. I launched a boutique hotel chain, Serene Stays, which quickly gained recognition for transforming historic properties into luxury accommodations while preserving their character. My business strategy was meticulous but creative. I developed a knack for identifying undervalued properties in areas poised for growth, renovating them thoughtfully, and either selling at significant profit or converting them into high-end rentals. I reinvested nearly everything, living well below my means despite my growing wealth. Not out of frugality, but because success itself had become my addiction. The thrill of closing a deal, of transforming a neglected space into something beautiful, fulfilled me in ways that family approval never had. Despite my success, I maintained a low profile. I had no social media presence, aside from a minimal LinkedIn page, gave no interviews, and declined invitations to industry galas whenever possible. My anonymity wasn't calculated. I simply had no interest in being known. The quiet girl who had learned to exist in the shadow of her sister had grown into a woman comfortable with invisibility, even as her financial empire expanded. My life changed irrevocably during a business trip to Florence in the fall of 2018. I was 31, attending an international real estate investment conference. After a long day of presentations, I wandered into a small wine bar in the historic center, seeking solitude and a good glass of Brunello. The place was nearly empty except for a tall, dark-haired man behind the counter, arranging bottles with the careful precision of someone who truly cared about wine. "First time in Florence?" he asked as I took a seat at the bar. His English was perfect but carried the melodic undertones of an Italian accent. "Third, actually," I replied. "But I never get tired of it." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, not the practiced hospitality smile I'd grown accustomed to. "Then let me pour you something special, not for tourists." That something special was a rare vintage from a small family vineyard in Montepulciano. As I sipped, he explained the history of the region, the family who had produced this particular bottle, and the unique climate conditions that had made that year's harvest exceptional. His passion was captivating. He introduced himself as Alessandro Ricci, a sommelier and wine producer whose family had been making wine in Tuscany for 4 generations. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from wine to architecture, art, and travel. For the first time in years, I found myself talking about more than business. By the time he reluctantly informed me that the bar would be closing soon, 3 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. When he asked for my number, I surprised myself by giving it to him without hesitation. The next morning, he texted to invite me to dinner. My conference schedule was packed, but I rearranged meetings to free my evening. Alessandro took me to a tiny restaurant tucked away in a narrow alleyway, the kind of place only locals knew about. Over homemade pappardelle and more incredible wine, I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone about my childhood, my struggles through college, and even my complicated family dynamics. "And your family, they must be very proud of what you have built," he said, refilling my glass. I laughed softly. "They don't actually know. We don't talk much about my life when we speak." His brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "How is this possible? You have created an empire." I shrugged. They never asked. And after a while, it seemed strange to volunteer the information, like I'd be bragging or seeking attention. Alessandro shook his head. "It is not bragging to share your joy and success with those you love. Perhaps they would be happy to know." His perspective was so simple, so uncomplicated by the years of emotional baggage I carried, but I couldn't imagine suddenly announcing to my family that I was worth millions. The conversation moved on, but his words lingered in my mind. After returning to New York, Alessandro and I continued our relationship long distance. He visited monthly, and I flew to Italy whenever I could. Unlike previous relationships, where my success had often created tension or insecurity, Alessandro celebrated my achievements without feeling threatened by them. His own business, a well-respected wine export company, was successful in its own right, and he understood the dedication required to build something meaningful. 6 months into our relationship, Alessandro mentioned that his dream property, an ancient villa in the hills of Tuscany, had come on the market. "It has been in the same family for over 300 years, he explained during a video call, his excitement palpable. "The vineyards are small but exceptional, and the olive groves produce some of the finest oil in the region. But the price," he sighed. "It is beyond what I can manage, even with a loan." I asked for details, photos, anything he could send. That night, I stayed up researching the property, its history, and its potential. By morning, I had made my decision. I called my financial advisor and arranged for the purchase. $6 million for 300 years of history, 15 bedrooms, 20 acres of vineyards, and the most breathtaking views of the Tuscan countryside imaginable. 2 weeks later, I flew to Italy and took Alessandro to dinner at his favorite restaurant in Florence. After dessert, I handed him a small box. Inside was an antique key with a silk ribbon tied around it. "What is this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "The key to our future," I replied. "If you want it to be." His confusion lasted only until I showed him the deed to Villa Serenita, now registered in both our names. He stared at the document in disbelief, before tears filled his eyes. "You did this? For us?" he whispered. "For us," I confirmed. "I thought it could be our home at least part of the year, and you could expand the vineyard like you've always wanted." Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage diamond ring, elegant and understated. "I had planned to ask you tonight," he said, laughing through tears. "You have stolen my moment, but made it infinitely better." That night, newly engaged, we drove to the villa, our villa, and walked through its ancient rooms by moonlight, planning renovations and dreaming of our future together. For the first time, I felt not just successful, but truly fortunate. I had found someone who valued me for exactly who I was, without comparison or condition. Over the next year, we split our time between New York and Tuscany, overseeing the careful restoration of Villa Serenita. Alessandro expanded the vineyard and modernized the wine production facilities, while I focused on preserving the historic character of the main house while adding contemporary comforts. We hired local artisans to restore frescoes, refinish original wood floors, and rebuild crumbling stone walls using traditional methods. Throughout this time, I maintained my usual limited contact with my family. Our conversations remained superficial. They told me about Jasmine's new promotion at a PR firm, neighborhood gossip, and their vacation plans. While I offered vague updates about work going well and enjoying Italy when I can visit, Alessandro frequently encouraged me to share more, to invite them to see our home, but something held me back. Years of feeling peripheral had calcified into habit, and the thought of suddenly revealing my life felt both vulnerable and strangely like bragging. "They are your family," Alessandro would say. "Families should share happiness." "Soon," I would promise. "When the time is right." Little did I know that the universe had its own timeline in mind, one that would force the issue in ways I could never have anticipated. As the renovation of Villa Serenita neared completion in early spring, Alessandro and I began discussing wedding plans. We wanted something intimate but meaningful, a a celebration that honored both our relationship and the historic property that had brought us together. What about early October? Alessandro suggested one evening as we sat on the terrace, watching the sun set behind the vineyard. The grape harvest will be complete, the weather still warm, but not too hot. And the light in October is magical here. I imagined us exchanging vows with the backdrop of autumn, tinged vineyards, surrounded by the golden Tuscan light he described. October sounds perfect, I agreed. Small, maybe 50 guests? Alessandro laughed. From my side alone, there will be 30 relatives who would never forgive me if they were excluded. And then your family and friends. My family. Despite our 15-month engagement, I had yet to introduce Alessandro to my parents, always finding reasons to postpone a visit. I should probably call them soon, I said, to let them know the date so they can make arrangements. More than call, Alessandro insisted gently. Invite them here, before the wedding. Let them meet me, see our home. I promised to think about it, but in truth, the idea filled me with a strange anxiety. What would they make of this life I'd built without their knowledge or help? Would they be happy for me, or would they somehow make it about Jasmine, as they had with everything else? The next morning, I finally made the call. It was early afternoon in Boston, and my mother answered on the fourth ring. Loretta! What a surprise. Is everything okay? The assumption that I would only call if something was wrong stung, but I pushed past it. Everything's fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. I'm calling because Alessandro and I have set a wedding date. October 12th, in Tuscany. October? She sounded distracted. I could hear her flipping through papers in the background. This October? That's only 5 months away. We don't need much time to plan. It will be relatively small, and we have the perfect venue already. I took a deep breath. I'd like you, Dad, and Jasmine to come, of course. I can arrange flights and accommodations. That's thoughtful, dear. Her tone was non-committal. Let me check our calendar and talk to your father. Jasmine might have work commitments. You know how busy she is these days. We spoke for a few more minutes. She asked nothing about Alessandro beyond his name, nothing about our plans or our life together. Before ending the call, she mentioned that Jasmine had recently started dating a very successful dental surgeon and was quite serious about him. I congratulated her and hung up feeling the familiar hollow sensation that conversations with my mother always left. Alessandro found me on the terrace an hour later, still staring at my phone. How did it go? He asked. Like every conversation with my mother. Polite, distant, and mostly about Jasmine, I replied. But at least I told them. They'll probably come. What else would they have going on in October? For the next week, I heard nothing. I busied myself with wedding plans, meeting with local caterers and florists, selecting invitations, and finalizing our guest list. Alessandro's family embraced me completely, his mother insisting on weekly dinners where she taught me traditional Tuscan recipes, and his sisters treating me like one of their own. Their warmth made the silence from my own family even more conspicuous. Finally, 8 days after my call, my phone rang while I was reviewing design samples for our wedding invitations. Seeing my mother's name, I answered immediately. Hi, Mom. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me, I said lightly, trying to mask my hurt at her delayed response. Loretta, I need to talk to you about October. Her voice sounded strange, a mixture of excitement and discomfort. Something wonderful has happened. Jasmine got engaged last weekend. To Dr. Harrington, the one I mentioned. They want to get married quickly, and they've set their date for October 5th. My stomach tightened. That's great news. Congratulations to her, but that's a week before our wedding. Yes, well, that's what I'm calling about. She paused, and I could almost see her nervously twisting her wedding ring, a habit from whenever she delivered unwelcome news. The thing is, with Jasmine's wedding so close to yours, it's going to be impossible for us to travel to Italy the following week. The expense, the time off work for your father, the planning we need to help with here. The implication hung in the air between us until I finally asked, Are you saying you won't be coming to my wedding? Sweetheart, we wish we could do both, but it's just not possible. Jasmine's wedding is here, all our family and friends can attend, and frankly, she needs our help with the arrangements. Another pause. Would it be possible for you to change your date? Maybe to next spring? We'd certainly try to come then. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Our venue is booked, Mom. The invitations are about to be printed. We've been planning this for months. Well, you never actually told us the date until last week, she said defensively. And it's not as if you've included us in any of your planning. We don't even know this Alessandro person. Because every time I try to tell you about my life, the conversation somehow becomes about Jasmine, I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. That's not fair, Loretta. You've always been so independent, we thought that's how you preferred things. A muffled voice in the background caught her attention. Your father wants to speak with you. Before I could respond, my father's gruff voice came through the line. Loretta, you need to understand our position here. Your sister's wedding is the family's priority. She's getting married here, where everyone can attend. You chose to live halfway around the world and plan a wedding without consulting any of us. We can't be expected to just drop everything and fly to Italy because you decided on a date. My entire body felt cold. I see, I said quietly. So after a lifetime of putting Jasmine first, nothing has changed. Now that's not what I said, he replied, his voice rising. Don't twist my words. This is about practicality, not favoritism. It's fine, Dad, I interrupted, surprising myself with how calm I sounded despite the storm inside me. You don't need to explain further. I understand perfectly. Attend Jasmine's wedding. Send my congratulations. Loretta, he began, but I'd already ended the call. I sat motionless at my desk, invitation samples forgotten, as tears slid silently down my cheeks. The rational part of my brain had expected this. Hadn't my parents spent my entire life making it clear that Jasmine's needs and wants would always come first? Yet some childish, hopeful part of me had believed that my wedding might be different, that they might just once prioritize a milestone in my life. Alessandro found me there an hour later, eyes red but tears dried. I told him everything. His initial reaction was disbelief, then anger on my behalf. This is unacceptable, he said, pacing the room. How can they choose one daughter over another for such an important day? We could change our date, yes, but that is not the point. Changing the date wouldn't change anything, I said quietly. They'd find another reason. They always have. Alessandro knelt beside my chair and took my hands in his. Then we will have the most beautiful wedding without them. My family will be your family. Our friends will fill the villa with more love than you can imagine. I nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. I won't beg them to come. I won't reschedule our perfect day. And I won't tell them about the villa or the business or any of it. Let them wonder why we're getting married in Tuscany. Let them think we're renting some little venue we can barely afford. Are you sure that's what you want? Alessandro asked gently. I'm sure, I said, a strange calm settling over me. If they can't be bothered to come to my wedding, they don't deserve to know the truth about my life. That evening, I sent a brief email to my mother. I understand your decision. The date remains October 12th. You're welcome to attend if your plans change. I attached the official invitation with the villa's address, but no explanation of its significance. I also included information for flights and nearby hotels, though I knew they wouldn't use it. My mother's reply came the next morning. We're sorry it worked out this way. Jasmine sends her love and hopes you understand. No mention of my father, no questions about the venue, no real acknowledgement of what their decision meant, just another dismissal dressed up as an apology. That night, lying beside Alessandro in our beautiful bedroom with its centuries-old beamed ceiling, I made peace with their absence. My wedding would be a celebration of the life I'd built despite them, not a reminder of what they had failed to give me. I would not let their rejection cast a shadow over the happiest day of my life. Are you okay? Alessandro whispered in the darkness. I will be, I answered, surprised to find I meant it. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. With my family's decision final, Alessandro and I threw ourselves into creating the wedding of our dreams. Money was no object, but we wanted something meaningful rather than merely extravagant. We hired Valentina Russo, Italy's most sought, after-wedding planner, known for her impeccable taste and attention to historical detail. Your villa is a treasure, Valentina declared during our first meeting as we walked through the property. We will honor its history while celebrating your future. Nothing overproduced, nothing that feels imported or inauthentic. Together we crafted a vision, an elegant celebration that would showcase the villa's natural beauty and the surrounding landscape. The ceremony would take place at sunset in the ancient olive grove, where gnarled trees that had stood for centuries would witness our vows. Dinner would follow on the grand terrace overlooking the vineyards, under strings of soft lights that mirrored the emerging stars. "What about flowers?" Valentina asked, notebook in hand. "From our own gardens," I decided, "and wildflowers from the surrounding fields. Nothing imported." Alessandro smiled at this. "The wine, of course, will be from our vineyard. The first bottles from our renovation." As the weeks passed, our home transformed. Stonemasons restored the crumbling sections of the ancient wall surrounding the property. Gardeners coaxed the neglected formal gardens back to their former glory. The pool, which had been empty for decades, was carefully rehabilitated, its original mosaic floor preserved and repaired by local artisans whose families had been doing such work for generations. I found myself unexpectedly emotional watching these changes. This wasn't just preparation for a wedding, it was bringing history back to life, honoring the legacy of this place while creating our own. The villa had stood through wars, plagues, political upheavals, and family dramas across 3 centuries. Our story would be just one chapter in its long history, but we were determined to make it a beautiful one. For the menu, we enlisted Paolo Bartolini, a Michelin-starred chef who had grown up in a nearby village. "I climbed these hills as a boy," he told us over espresso. "To create a wedding feast here would be an honor." His proposed menu featured hyper-local ingredients: cheese from a farm visible from our terrace, vegetables grown in our restored kitchen garden, meats from animals raised on neighboring farms. The guest list solidified at 100 people, 30 of Alessandro's relatives, plus our closest friends and business associates from around the world. My side would be smaller: my college roommate Lisa and her husband, my first boss in real estate who had become a mentor, and a handful of friends who had stood by me through the years. The absence of my family members was a silent acknowledgement that hung in the air during planning sessions, but I refused to let it diminish my excitement. As a surprise for Alessandro, I commissioned a local composer to arrange a piece specifically for our ceremony, to be performed by a string quartet from the Florence Symphony Orchestra. The composition would incorporate melodies from both American and Italian musical traditions, a harmony of our different backgrounds coming together. For my dress, I traveled to Rome to meet with Sofia Ricci, no relation to Alessandro, an emerging designer known for her modern interpretation of classic Italian style. Together, we created a gown that felt both timeless and uniquely mine: silk crepe with delicate hand, embroidery featuring tiny vines and olive branches, a nod to our villa's landscape. The final fitting left even the typically reserved Sofia with tears in her eyes. "You look like you belong in a Renaissance painting," she said, adjusting the sweep of the train. Alessandro and I decided to write our own vows, spending evenings on the terrace with notebooks, occasionally reading lines to each other and laughing when we discovered we'd had similar thoughts. "Great minds," he would say, kissing my forehead before returning to his writing. 3 weeks before the wedding, after confirming that none of my family had responded to the invitation, I did something that surprised even me. I sent formal invitations to my parents and Jasmine, along with first-class plane tickets. Not because I expected them to come — Jasmine's wedding was the week before, after all — but because I wanted the record to show that despite their rejection, I had remained generous. The ball was entirely in their court. "They won't come," I told Alessandro as I sealed the envelopes. "But I want to be able to look back and know I did everything I could." He kissed my hand. "That is why I love you. Your heart stays open even when it has every reason to close." As October approached, Villa Serenita became a hive of activity. Deliveries arrived daily: table linens hand-woven in Florence, antique silver candelabras sourced from Rome, custom, printed menus on paper made in a mill that had operated since the 16th century. Each element was chosen with care to create an atmosphere of understated luxury that respected the villa's character. 1 week before the wedding, Alessandro's family began to arrive, filling the guest rooms and bringing the ancient house to life with laughter and conversation. His mother took over the kitchen, insisting on preparing traditional family recipes alongside the professional catering staff. His nieces and nephews ran through the gardens, their excitement infectious. I found myself swept up in their warmth, included in family jokes and stories as if I'd always been part of them. Alessandro's grandmother, an elegant woman of 87, took my hand during a family dinner and said, "The villa has chosen well. Some houses need the right souls to bring them back to life." 2 days before the wedding, I received an email from my mother. My heart raced as I opened it, a reflexive hope rising despite my better judgment. The message was brief. "Jasmine's wedding was beautiful. Wishing you the same happiness on your day. Sorry again we couldn't make the trip. Send photos." I closed my laptop without replying. What could I say? That I was sorry to have missed my sister's wedding too, though no one had actually invited me? That I would indeed send photos, which would reveal far more about my life than they currently knew? The time for those conversations had passed. Now it was time to focus on the future I was building, not the past I couldn't change. The night before our wedding, Alessandro honored an old Italian tradition by staying at his parents' nearby home. For luck, his mother insisted, though we both found it amusing given that we'd been living together for over a year. Alone in our villa for the last time as a single woman, I walked through the moonlit rooms, touching the ancient stones and wooden beams that had witnessed so many lives. In the master bedroom, I opened the wall safe and took out the jewelry I would wear the next day. Diamond earrings I had bought myself after my first $1 million deal, a bracelet Alessandro had given me when we closed on the villa, and a sapphire necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, the only family heirloom I possessed. Looking at these pieces, each marking a significant moment in my journey, I felt a surprising sense of completion. Yes, my parents would be absent tomorrow, but I had created a life filled with people who chose to be present. The lonely girl seeking validation had grown into a woman surrounded by authentic love. Tomorrow would be perfect not despite my family's absence, but regardless of it. I fell asleep with the windows open, the gentle Tuscan breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and ripening grapes into my dreams. Whatever happened next, this place was home. And tomorrow, it would witness the beginning of our next chapter. I woke on my wedding day to golden October sunlight, streaming through the centuries, old windows of Villa Serenita. For a moment, I simply lay there, watching dust motes dance in the light, absorbing the knowledge that by sunset I would be Alessandro's wife. A soft knock at the door broke my reverie. Alessandro's sisters Francesca and Lucia, bearing breakfast on an antique silver tray and wide smiles. "The bride must not lift a finger today," Francesca announced, setting down coffee and fresh pastries. "It is tradition." "And the weather is perfect," Lucia added. "Clear skies, gentle breeze. The saints are smiling on your union." They bustled around the room, opening curtains and laying out items for my preparation, while I sipped espresso and tried to calm the butterflies in my stomach. Not nervousness about marrying Alessandro. That decision felt more right than any I'd ever made, but the normal jitters of a day when all eyes would be on me. By 10 o'clock, the villa hummed with activity. Florists arranged wild roses, olive branches, and local wildflowers throughout the house and grounds. Caterers prepared in the modernized kitchen, the scent of fresh herbs and baking bread wafting through open windows. The string quartet arrived to set up in the olive grove, practicing scales that floated up to my balcony as my hair and makeup team worked their magic. "You are the most relaxed bride I have ever seen," remarked Julia, the makeup artist, as she applied a subtle wash of color to my cheeks. "Most women are frantic by this hour." I smiled. "I have nothing to worry about. Everything is in capable hands, and at the end of the day, I'll be married to the love of my life. The rest is just details." What I didn't say was that after a lifetime of being overlooked, I had learned to find peace within myself rather than seeking external validation. Today wasn't about impressing anyone or creating a spectacle. It was about celebrating the life Alessandro and I had built together, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us. Around noon, Lisa arrived, my college roommate and oldest friend, who had flown in from Seattle the night before. She gasped when she entered my room, where I was being helped into my dress. "Loretta," she breathed, "you look absolutely stunning. And this place, when you said villa in Tuscany, I pictured something charming but nothing like this. It's like something out of a movie." I hugged her carefully, mindful of my hair and makeup. "Thank you for coming all this way. It means everything to have you here. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." she replied, then hesitated. Your parents aren't coming, I finished for her. They chose to attend Jasmine's wedding last week instead. Lisa's expression darkened. After everything, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said firmly. Today isn't about who isn't here. It's about celebrating with the people who are. By 4 o'clock, guests began arriving, greeted by staff offering glasses of Prosecco and guided tours of the ground floor of the villa. From my window, I watched Alessandro welcoming people, handsome in his custom suit, gesturing animatedly as he presumably explained the property's history. My heart swelled seeing his easy charm, the way he made everyone feel special and welcomed. At 4:30, my wedding planner Valentina knocked on my door. It's time, she said with a warm smile. Everyone is seated in the olive grove. Alessandro is waiting for you. My legs trembled slightly as I made my way down the grand staircase, my hand on the ancient wooden banister that countless brides before me must have touched on their own wedding days. At the bottom, Giorgio, Alessandro's father, waited to escort me. We had decided against the traditional giving away. I was a woman of 34 giving myself freely in marriage, but I had asked Giorgio to walk with me as a symbol of being welcomed into their family. You honor us by becoming our daughter, Giorgio said, offering his arm. Alessandro has never been happier than since he met you. We followed a path through the formal gardens, lined with candles and hurricane lanterns that would illuminate the way back after dark. As we approached the olive grove, I expected to hear the string quartet playing the processional music we had selected. Instead, I heard something much grander, the full sound of what could only be an orchestra. Rounding the final corner, I gasped. There, arranged beneath the ancient olive trees, was not just our string quartet, but the entire Florence Symphony Orchestra. Alessandro stood waiting at the end of the aisle, beaming with pride at having arranged this surprise. Tears pricked my eyes as the conductor raised his baton and the orchestra began playing the piece I had commissioned, now arranged for full orchestra rather than just strings. The guests rose as I began my walk toward Alessandro. The late afternoon sun filtered through the silver-green olive leaves, casting dappled light across the gathering. I recognized faces from around the world, business associates who had become friends, Alessandro's extended family, neighbors from the surrounding estates. What struck me most was that every person present had actively chosen to be there, traveling from far and wide to celebrate with us. When I reached Alessandro, he took my hands in his, eyes shining with unshed tears. You have taken my breath away from the moment we met, he whispered. And you do so again today. The ceremony was everything we had hoped, personal, meaningful, and deeply connected to the land around us. We exchanged the vows we had written, promising not just love and fidelity, but partnership and growth. Alessandro spoke of finding his heart's home in me, while I promised to create with him a life as enduring as the ancient stones of our villa. When we exchanged rings, simple bands of gold mined in Tuscany, the setting sun broke through the trees at precisely the right angle, bathing us in golden light that several guests later described as almost mystical. After being pronounced husband and wife, we led our guests back to the villa's grand terrace for the reception. Twinkling lights hung overhead, reflecting in the glassware and silver that adorned long tables, arranged to offer everyone a view of the countryside. Servers circulated with trays of local specialties, while Paolo, our chef, personally presented each course with a description of its origins and significance. The wine flowed freely, all from our own vineyard, the first bottles produced since our renovation. Alessandro beamed with pride as guests praised its quality, many expressing surprise when told it was from our estate rather than a renowned label. You didn't tell them this is your villa, did you? Lisa asked quietly during dinner, observing the admiring glances from guests taking in the property. I shook my head. Not specifically. Most assume we rented it for the occasion. Well, they're figuring it out now, she noted. I've overheard at least 3 conversations where people are realizing that you actually own this incredible place. Throughout the evening, photographers circulated discreetly, capturing candid moments in the spectacular setting. We had hired Matteo Bianchi, a celebrated documentary photographer known for his work in National Geographic, to lead the team. I want the photos to tell the story of not just our day, but this place, I had explained when hiring him. Its history, its beauty, and the new life we're bringing to it. As the night progressed, The formal dinner gave way to dancing under the stars. Alessandro's younger relatives taught American guests traditional Italian folk dances, while music spanning both our cultures kept everyone on their feet. Around midnight, fireworks illuminated the Tuscan sky, another surprise from Alessandro, who knew my childhood fascination with them. Standing in his arms, watching explosions of color reflect in the villa's windows, I felt a completeness I had never known before. "Happy?" Alessandro asked, his lips close to my ear. "Beyond words," I replied. This was perfect. Everyone who truly matters is here. The celebration continued until dawn. When the last guests retired to their rooms or nearby accommodations, Alessandro and I retreated to our suite, exhausted but elated. On the bedside table was a package, the first selection of wedding photos that Matteo had edited and printed during the reception, a gift so we could immediately revisit moments from the day. We flipped through them together, marveling at how he had captured not just images but emotions, the love in our eyes as we exchanged vows, the joy of the gathering, the spectacular beauty of Villa Serenita as backdrop to it all. Several photos showed the villa in its entirety, illuminated at dusk with the mountains behind it, looking like something from a luxury travel magazine. "These are incredible," Alessandro murmured. "Will you share them with your family?" I ran my finger over a particularly beautiful shot of us dancing on the terrace, the villa's facade glowing warmly behind us. "I think I will," I said slowly. Not to hurt them or make them regret their choice, but because this is my life now. Our life. Maybe it's time they knew. The next morning, still glowing from our perfect day, I selected 10 photos that best captured the essence of our wedding. The ancient villa bathed in golden light. Alessandro and me exchanging vows beneath olive trees. The orchestra playing in the grove. Our first dance on the terrace. Dinner under the stars with the Tuscan landscape as backdrop. The fireworks illuminating the entire estate. Each image told part of our story while also revealing the true magnitude of what I had built without their knowledge. I created a simple social media post, something I rarely did, with these photos and a caption that read only, "The happiest day of my life at our home in Tuscany." Then I sent the link to my mother, father, and Jasmine with a brief message. Wanted to share some memories from our special day. Then I put my phone away and joined my new husband for breakfast on the terrace, surrounded by the beauty of our home and the love we had celebrated. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The little girl, desperate for approval, had grown into a woman who had found her own path to happiness with or without her family's validation. The morning after sharing our wedding photos, Alessandro and I enjoyed a lazy breakfast on the terrace, discussing plans for our abbreviated honeymoon, a week sailing along the Amalfi Coast before business commitments required our return. I had deliberately left my phone inside, determined not to spend our first day as a married couple anxiously checking for my family's reactions. Around noon, however, curiosity got the better of me. I excused myself and went to our bedroom where my phone sat charging. The screen showed 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 35 email notifications. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through them. 6 calls from my mother, 4 from my father, and 7 from Jasmine. The text messages ranged from my mother's initial beautiful photos, "The venue looks amazing," to increasingly urgent requests to call her immediately. The most recent, sent 30 minutes ago, simply read, "Loretta, please call. We need to talk about these pictures." I took a deep breath and returned to Alessandro on the terrace. "My family has seen the photos," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "They seem rather desperate to speak with me." He raised an eyebrow. "And will you call them?" I considered the question. Part of me wanted to let them stew, to experience a fraction of the disappointment I had felt when they chose not to attend my wedding. But another part recognized this might be the opening needed to establish a more honest relationship. Later, I decided, today is for us. We spent the afternoon exploring the far reaches of our property with our estate manager, discussing plans for expanding the olive groves and potentially opening a small farm, table restaurant using our products. By evening, my phone had accumulated another dozen missed calls. After dinner, with Alessandro's encouragement, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been holding the phone in anticipation. "Loretta? Thank God! We've been trying to reach you all day." Her voice sounded strained, almost frantic. "I was busy with my husband," I replied calmly. "It was our first day as a married couple, after all." "Yes, of course. But—" She paused, and I could almost see her gathering herself. "Loretta, those photos you sent, that villa, the one where you got married, is that yours?" The directness of the question surprised me. I had expected more dancing around the subject. "Yes," I said simply. "Alessandro and I bought it last year. We've spent months renovating it." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked in a small voice, "How is that possible? A place like that must cost." $6 million, I finished for her, plus about $2 million in renovations. I heard what sounded like a choked sob. "But how? Where? When did you?" "I've been successful in real estate for over a decade, Mom. I own properties throughout New York, Miami, and now Italy. I founded a boutique hotel chain 5 years ago that now has locations in 8 cities." "But you never said anything!" she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Every time we asked how work was going, you just said fine or busy." "You asked how work was going the same way you ask about the weather," I replied, keeping my tone even. "You never actually wanted details. And after a while, it felt strange to volunteer information about my success when you showed so little interest in my life." "That's not fair, Loretta," she protested. "We always cared. You were just so independent, so private about everything." Before I could respond, she continued in a rush. "Your father wants to speak with you. He's been beside himself all day." The phone shuffled, and my father's gruff voice came through. "Loretta, is that really your house in those pictures? That palace in Italy?" "Villa Serenita," I confirmed. "Yes, it's ours. The vineyard, too." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought you were just getting by in New York, working some corporate job. If we'd known." "If you'd known I was wealthy, you would have what?" I interrupted. "Treated me differently? Shown more interest in my life? Attended my wedding instead of Jasmine's?" The line went quiet for a moment. "That's not fair," he finally said, echoing my mother. "We made a choice based on the information we had. If we'd known the wedding would be at your own Italian villa, then my wedding would have finally been worth attending." The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's exactly why I never told you. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I own." I heard my mother in the background asking questions I couldn't make out. My father cleared his throat. "Look, we made a mistake. We see that now. But you should have been honest with us about your life. The same way you were honest about prioritizing Jasmine's wedding over mine?" I asked quietly. Another uncomfortable silence. "We'd like to make it up to you," he finally said. "Maybe we could come visit. See this villa of yours. Meet Alessandro properly." The request was so predictable I almost laughed. Now that they knew I had wealth and a spectacular property, suddenly they were interested. "I'll think about it," I said neutrally. "It's been a long day, and I should get back to my husband." Of course," my father said quickly. "Just think about it, okay? And Jasmine wants to speak with you too, when you have time." I ended the call with vague promises to be in touch soon, then turned to find Alessandro watching me with concern. "How do you feel?" he asked, pulling me into his arms. Vindicated, sad, angry, relieved. I shook my head, all at once. "And what will you do about their request to visit?" I sighed. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to refuse, to make them feel a fraction of the rejection I've felt. But another part wonders if this might be an opportunity to finally build an honest relationship." Alessandro kissed my forehead. "Whatever you decide, I support you. But remember, forgiveness heals the one who forgives more than the one forgiven." The next morning brought more messages. An email from my mother with a formal, somewhat stiff apology for missing the wedding, full of phrases like, "had we known" and "terrible misunderstanding." A text from my father asking if we could FaceTime so he could see more of the villa. And finally, a series of texts from Jasmine. "Oh my God, Loretta, your wedding looked incredible. That place is insane. Why didn't you ever tell us you were so successful? I feel terrible now about everything." Mom and Dad are freaking out. Dad keeps saying he had no idea his little girl was so accomplished. "Can we talk? I know my timing sucks, but I need to ask you something important." I showed Alessandro the messages, and he raised an eyebrow at the last one. What do you think she wants to ask? Knowing Jasmine? Probably if she can have her honeymoon at our villa, I replied dryly. As if on cue, my phone rang with Jasmine's number. With a deep breath, I answered. Loretta, finally! I've been trying to reach you for days. Jasmine's voice had the same breathless quality it always had when she was excited about something. It's been one day, Jasmine, and I was busy with my husband. I kept my tone polite but distant. Congratulations on your wedding. I hope it was everything you wanted. Oh, it was beautiful, but nothing like yours, she replied quickly. That villa is absolutely incredible, Loretta. I had no idea you were so successful, I supplied. Yes, all those years you never said a word. We all thought you were just doing okay, getting by in New York. If we'd known you owned a literal mansion in Tuscany, then what? I interrupted. You wouldn't have scheduled your wedding 1 week before mine? Mom and Dad would have chosen to attend my wedding instead of yours? She faltered. Well, no, it's complicated. My venue had limited availability, and Alan's parents had already booked flights, and… It's fine, Jasmine, I said, cutting her off. I understand your wedding was the priority. It always has been. An uncomfortable silence followed. Then Jasmine said in a small voice, I want to apologize, Loretta, not just for the wedding timing, but for everything. I never realized how much Mom and Dad favored me until I saw those pictures and understood what you've accomplished on your own, without any of their support. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. In all our years, Jasmine had never acknowledged the preferential treatment she'd received. I appreciate that, I said cautiously. There's something else, she continued. Alan and we've been talking and, well, we're thinking of postponing our honeymoon. The resort in Bali we booked had some issues, and when I saw your villa, I just wondered if maybe. And there it was, exactly as I'd predicted. You want a honeymoon at our villa, I finished for her. Just for a week or two, she rushed to add. It would give us a chance to meet Alessandro properly, and you and I could spend some time together. Mom and Dad could come too. They're desperate to see the place. It could be like a second reception for you, with your family this time. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The audacity was so typical of Jasmine and my parents, missing my wedding but assuming they could simply invite themselves to my home afterward, turning my honeymoon period into an extended family vacation centered around them. I don't think that will work, I said finally. Alessandro and I have plans, and the villa is undergoing some additional renovations in the coming weeks. A small lie, but a necessary boundary. Oh, Jasmine's disappointment was palpable. Well, maybe later in the year? We'll see, I said noncommittally. I need to go now, Jasmine. I'll be in touch. For the next week, as Alessandro and I enjoyed our honeymoon along the Amalfi Coast, messages continued to arrive from my family. My mother sent long emails detailing Jasmine's wedding, as if trying to prove it had been worth missing mine for. My father sent awkward texts asking about the value of properties in Tuscany and whether I might help him with some investment advice. Jasmine alternated between apologies and thinly veiled hints about visiting. 2 weeks after our wedding, a thick envelope arrived at the villa via international courier. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father, something so unprecedented that I had to sit down while reading it. Dear Loretta, it began. I am not a man who finds words easily, especially when it comes to admitting mistakes. But seeing your wedding photos and realizing the success you've achieved without any support from your mother and me has forced me to confront some painful truths. Throughout your childhood, we consistently put Jasmine's needs and desires ahead of yours. We told ourselves it was because you were stronger, more independent, less in need of our attention. But that was never fair to you, and I see now how deeply we must have hurt you over the years. Missing your wedding was inexcusable, regardless of where it was held or what we knew about your circumstances. A father should be present for his daughter's most important day, and I failed you in that fundamental duty. I cannot undo the past, but I want you to know that I am incredibly proud of the woman you've become, not because of your financial success or your beautiful home, but because of the strength and dignity you've shown despite our failings. You deserved better from us, and I hope it's not too late to begin making amends. With love and deepest regrets, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. In 54 years, My father had never expressed such vulnerability or acknowledged his preferential treatment of Jasmine. Was it triggered solely by the revelation of my wealth? Perhaps partly. But there seemed to be genuine remorse beneath his words, a recognition of something deeper than just missed material advantages. That evening, I shared the letter with Alessandro. "What do you think?" I asked. "Is this genuine, or are they just impressed by the villa and my money?" Alessandro considered carefully. "Perhaps both," he said finally. "The revelation of your success forced them to see you differently, yes. But sometimes people need a shock to recognize truths they have been avoiding. The question is not why they want to make amends now, but whether you want to give them the chance." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, my revelation had apparently caused significant ripples. Through Lisa, who remained friends with some of Jasmine's circle, I learned that Jasmine had abruptly canceled her original honeymoon plans and was now insisting that her new husband postpone the trip entirely until they could arrange something more special. She had also begun making noises about wanting a larger house, reportedly telling friends, "If Loretta could buy a villa in Tuscany, surely we can afford something better than our starter home." It was exactly the kind of comparative thinking I had hoped to avoid by keeping my success private. But now that the truth was out, I had to decide how to move forward with my family, whether to open the door to a new, more honest relationship or to maintain the distance that had protected me for so long. A month after our wedding, I finally agreed to meet my parents. Not at our villa in Tuscany, as they had repeatedly suggested, but on neutral territory, an upscale restaurant in New York during a business trip. Alessandro accompanied me, his steady presence a reminder that I was no longer facing my family alone. When we arrived, my parents were already seated, looking uncharacteristically nervous. My mother had worn her finest dress, while my father had his important meeting suit on, the same one he'd worn to Jasmine's college graduation. Their eyes widened as we approached, taking in my confident stride, Alessandro's European elegance, and perhaps the subtle markers of wealth we carried without effort. "Loretta," my mother breathed, standing to embrace me. I returned the hug stiffly, then introduced Alessandro. My father shook his hand with excessive vigor, repeating how pleased he was to finally meet the man who married my incredible daughter. The initial conversation was awkward, stilted compliments about the wedding photos, careful questions about the villa's history, and transparent attempts to illustrate how they had always believed in my potential. I let them ramble, sipping my wine and observing how differently they looked at me now. Not just with respect, but with a kind of uncertainty, as if suddenly realizing they were in the presence of a stranger who happened to be their daughter. Eventually, my father cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "Loretta, we owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually. Missing your wedding was unforgivable. Yet here you are, asking for forgiveness," I noted quietly. He flushed. "Yes, well, we're hoping it's not too late to make things right." "What exactly does making things right look like to you?" I asked, maintaining eye contact. My parents exchanged glances. "We thought perhaps we could visit your home in Italy," my mother suggested. "Have a small family gathering there, like a second reception. We could invite the extended family who missed the wedding." I shook my head slowly. "That's not going to happen." Their faces fell in identical expressions of disappointment. "But Loretta," my mother began, "we want to celebrate your marriage, see your beautiful home." "The time to celebrate my marriage was at my wedding," I interrupted gently, "which you chose not to attend." An uncomfortable silence descended over the table. Alessandro squeezed my hand supportively under the tablecloth. "I didn't come here for apologies or to arrange some belated celebration," I continued. "I came because I think it's time for honesty between us. All my life, I've been second to Jasmine in your priorities. I accepted that and built a life without expecting your support or approval. I kept my success private, not out of secrecy, but because it never seemed relevant to our relationship." My father started to protest, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Let me finish. I'm not angry anymore, and I'm not here for revenge or to make you feel guilty. I've made peace with our past. But moving forward requires acknowledging the truth of what happened." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "We just thought you were so capable, so independent. Jasmine seemed to need us more." "I needed you too," I said simply. "Every child does. But I learned to live without that support, and it made me stronger. I'm not looking to change the past. I'm interested in whether we can build something different for the future. My father leaned forward, eyes unexpectedly bright with tears. We want that too, Loretta. Just tell us how. For the next hour, we talked more openly than we ever had. I shared stories of my early struggles in real estate, the risks I'd taken, the setbacks I'd overcome. They listened with genuine interest, asking questions that indicated they were truly trying to understand the woman I had become. Alessandro charmed them with tales of our renovation adventures and his family's wine-making traditions. By dessert, we had established some boundaries. No, they could not honeymoon at our villa as Jasmine had apparently been lobbying for. No, I would not become the family financial advisor or investor as my father had hoped. Yes, they were welcome to visit Italy in the summer, staying at a nearby hotel, not in our home. Yes, I was open to more regular communication, but with the understanding that our relationship needed to be built on genuine interest, not sudden recognition of my worth because of my wealth. I'd like to know you, I told them as the evening ended. The real you, beyond your role as Jasmine's cheerleaders. And I'd like you to know me, not my success or my possessions, but who I am. My father nodded, looking somehow both smaller and more authentic than I'd ever seen him. We'd like that too, he said, more than anything. As we said our goodbyes, my mother held on to my hands longer than necessary. I'm sorry we weren't there on your wedding day, she said, her voice breaking. The photos were beautiful, but I know we missed something precious that can never be recaptured. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. In the taxi afterward, Alessandro asked if I felt the meeting had gone well. I considered the question carefully before answering. It wasn't about going well, I said finally. It was about being real. For the first time in my life, I spoke to my parents as an equal, not as a child seeking approval. And for the first time, they actually listened. Over the following months, our relationship evolved slowly. My parents made efforts to call regularly, asking thoughtful questions about my business and my life with Alessandro. I learned to open up gradually, sharing parts of myself I had previously kept hidden. We maintained our boundaries. When Jasmine continued to hint about visiting the villa, I consistently redirected her to lovely hotels in the area instead. The most surprising development came from Jasmine herself. After the initial shock of seeing my success, she went through a period of obvious envy, making pointed comments about lucky breaks and the advantages of getting into real estate at the right time. But as the months passed, something shifted. She began asking me for genuine advice about her career, her marriage, her future, not with envy, but with a new respect. I always thought Mom and Dad were right to focus more on me because I needed the help, and you didn't, she admitted during one phone call. But now I see that I relied on their support so much that I never developed the independence you have. I'm trying to change that. It was the most self-aware thing I had ever heard her say. That summer, 6 months after our wedding, my parents visited Italy as planned, staying at a boutique hotel in the nearby village. We spent 3 days showing them the villa, the vineyards, and the surrounding countryside. They were appropriately impressed, but, more importantly, they were respectful of our space and genuinely interested in our life there. My father even rolled up his sleeves to help Alessandro inspect a problem with the irrigation system, while my mother and I shared a bottle of wine on the terrace, talking about books we'd recently read. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to resurface. But there was also growth and a fragile new understanding between us. As I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, sitting on the terrace of my Tuscan villa with my husband by my side, I realized that the most valuable thing I had gained was not the property or the financial success, but the freedom to define myself on my own terms. The pain of being overlooked had pushed me to build a life of independence, teaching me to seek validation from within rather than from others' approval. Alessandro and I decided to establish a scholarship fund for students who demonstrated academic excellence despite limited family support. We named it after Mrs. Donovan, my high school English teacher, who had first told me I was capable of extraordinary things. Each year, the fund would support 5 students through college, providing not just financial assistance but mentorship and networking opportunities. From our wound comes our purpose, Alessandro said when we finalized the endowment. This is beautiful alchemy, turning past pain into future opportunity. On our first anniversary, We hosted a small gathering at Villa Serenita, close friends, Alessandro's family, and yes, my parents and Jasmine with her husband. Standing in the olive grove where we had exchanged vows, surrounded by people who valued us for who we were rather than what we possessed, I felt a sense of completion. The circle had somehow closed. The lonely girl seeking validation had found not just success, but genuine connection. That evening, as the sun set behind the Tuscan hills, casting our home in golden light, Alessandro and I slipped away from the gathering to share a private moment on our favorite balcony. "Are you happy with how things have evolved with your family?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me as we gazed at the vineyard below. "I'm at peace with it," I replied after some thought. "I don't need them to be perfect or to make up for the past. I just needed them to see me, really see me, and I think they finally do." "And what about you? Do you see yourself differently now?" I smiled. "I see myself more clearly. I understand that my worth was never dependent on their recognition. The journey to success taught me resilience, but the journey to self-acceptance taught me freedom." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing above our beautiful home, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses. Sometimes the doors that close direct us to the ones that were meant to open all along. And sometimes, standing on the balcony of your Tuscan villa with the love of your life, you realize that success is not measured in millions of dollars or magnificent properties, but in the peace you feel within your own heart. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who suddenly showed interest in your life after success? Comment below and share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal growth and healing. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth isn't defined by family validation. Thank you for joining me for this deeply personal story, and I hope you find your own Villa Serenita, whether it's a physical place or simply that quiet space within where you are completely at home with yourself.